Howdy folks, Dave here at Thunder Mesa Studio, where today we have a story about inspiration, trial and error, and some seat-of-the-pants modeling. You see, there's this spot over in Hanging Rock, next to the ruined adobe, that I've been saving for something. I just wasn't sure quite what. Now, usually when I model a scene, the structure comes first, and then detail castings are added to finish it off. But in this case, I was inspired by a collection of detail parts from Aspen Modeling Company and Wiseman Models to create a small blacksmith shop. It made sense that an outlaw burg like Hanging Rock would need a blacksmith for things like horseshoes, running irons, nails, wagon tires, and other such things. It also followed that the operation would be a simple, rawhide affair that could be taken down in a hurry should the law come snooping around. That meant I could model the blacksmith shop as an open-air structure with simple post and beam construction, allowing for all of those handsome details to take center stage. I started by sorting, cleaning, and dressing all of the detail parts, including the Aspen Model's blacksmith and his trusty anvil. The parts are a mixture of resin and white metal castings, and all were washed in warm, soapy water to remove any mold release. I used a hobby knife, small files, and an emery board to clean up any flash. Then, everything was painted with a dark brown primer. I like to start with a dark shade on detail castings and work my way toward the lighter tones. For the structure, I didn't make any elaborate plans, but had a fairly basic idea how I wanted it to look. I did some research into post and beam construction and drew the frame full size on some graph paper to act as a template. Then I pre-stained some lumber with my alcohol and India ink solution and built the frames from O-scale 8x8s, securing all of the parts together with yellow carpenter's glue. I started with the back wall, adding some 1x12 boards at the bottom, then moved to the front wall, making it a scale 2 feet higher so the roof would slope front to back in lean-to fashion. I basically designed the structure as I went along. I call this seat-of-the-pants modeling, where you make decisions on the fly and really need to trust your instincts. I find it a nice change of pace from kits and pre-planned models. To assemble the walls together, I measured and cut holes in the foam core backing for my template to receive the upright posts. Then I could build the side beams and braces in place while keeping everything nice and square. The front and back assemblies were further tied together by a series of 4x6 rafters, lightly notched to fit the beams and glued in place on scale 2-foot centers. Some horizontal 1x12 boards were added to enclose the lower left side where the forge would be located, and then it was time to see how the model looked in position on the layout. Well, After all that, I decided the structure was about 2 feet too tall, and used a razor saw to remove the extra length from the bottom of the upright posts. I did mention that there was some trial and error involved, right? There. That's more like it. I figured my blacksmith would need a sturdy work table, so I built one about 3 feet wide by 6 feet long, with 6x6 legs and a well-worn top made from coffee stir sticks. That was glued in place to the back wall, and then it was time to start adding the details. I spent a day painting and weathering all of the small details with Vallejo acrylics, and first in place was the bench vise, followed shortly by a keg for horseshoe nails and a small toolbox. An assortment of hammers, tongs, and wrenches rounded things out, and more tools were hung from a 2x4 rack along the back wall. Turning my attention to the forge, I drilled a 1/4-inch hole through the resin casting to accept a 5mm amber flickering LED that could simulate the glow of a hot coal fire. A 290 ohm resistor was soldered to the positive lead. Then everything was wired up and protected with heat shrink insulation. I used a hot wire tool to drill down through the foam scenery, and then threaded the wires through to connect with Hanging Rock's 9-volt DC lighting bus. A quick power check to make sure everything worked, and then it was time to paint and detail the forge itself. I used acrylic paints in various shades of reddish brown, umber, and other brick colors, then added mortar between the bricks with spackling compound, pushed into the cracks and then wiped away. A few individual bricks were then picked out with a small brush, and then everything was weathered with a wash of thin black. The bed of the forge was painted flat black, and more blacks and grays were dry brushed on to simulate ashes and soot. The forge was glued in place atop the amber LED with Eileen's tacky glue, and then a diluted mixture of glue was brushed on top to secure real coal grains and dust to make the LED look more like glowing hot coals. Finally, the cast resin bellows was painted and installed, hiding any suggestion of wires from view. I built a hood for the forge out of artist's Bristol board, which, when properly painted and weathered, does a pretty darn good job of simulating sheet metal. The smokestack was made from a length of plastic soda straw, cemented into place with cyanoacrylate adhesive. I used baking soda as a kicker on the CA and to strengthen the joints. This also does a nice job of simulating weld joints, as well as crusty old rust and creosote deposits. The hood was painted and weathered, then glued into place, and then it was time to plank the roof. Once again, I turned to my trusty coffee stir sticks, securing the boards to the 4x6 rafters with yellow carpenter's glue. I used scale 3-foot wide strips of black construction paper to model the rolled roofing, making sure to tear and abuse a few pieces as I glued them into place. Flashing for the smokestack was made from a small square of Bristol board, and then more CA, kicked with baking soda, was applied to fill gaps and simulate old welds and creosote. To give it some age, I weathered the roof with liberal amounts of chalk dust in gray, black, and rusty colors. Then it was time to apply the signs. I created signs in Adobe Photoshop using realistic CG wood textures. These were printed out at high resolution and laminated to Bristol board. The backs and edges were painted a dirty gray with watercolors, and the larger sign was trimmed with scale 1x2s to give it a more finished look. For luck, a pair of laser-cut horseshoes were added to the posts, one on each side, and appropriately rusted with chalk dust. I've found that the best way to model cloth is by using the real thing, You just need a material with threads that are fine enough to look right at scale. Cotton is usually way too big, but silk is perfect for this. So I cut up an old silk bandana to make canvas awnings and tarps out of. Rolled awnings were wound around a small dowel and then tied up with No. 10 crochet thread before being soaked with diluted white glue and painted with Vallejo light tan acrylics. The paint and glue stiffens the fabric as it dries, allowing you to form the material with realistic draping and sags that look right at scale. A final dusting with weathering chalks adds grime and wear, accentuating the folds and shadows. With the awnings applied, the blacksmith shop was ready to be installed on the layout. Since it doesn't have a floor, I tacked it in place with a little white glue, but it's still easy to remove should the need arise. And now the scene was ready to be dressed with the final details. First came a water pail next to the forge, the water modeled with Envirotex Light epoxy resin. I turned the old ruined adobe next door into a corral, complete with a paint horse waiting to be shoed. I made an awning for the adobe with the same techniques used earlier for the rolled canvas, but this time unrolled to provide a little shade and relief from the high desert sun. Wagon wheel, barrels, assorted iron debris modeled with bits from my scrap box, along with a coal bucket, shovel, and a few more tools were added to flesh things out. Then, with the scene properly set, it was time for the main character to make his entrance. The blacksmith is an excellent figure from Aspen Modeling Company, whose name, I decided, would be Ezra Washington, a freed man who left Louisiana after the war to find a better life and ply his trade out west. Now he happily works for himself, day and night, as Hanging Rock's only qualified blacksmith. Shoeing horses, repairing wagons, and even fabricating the occasional running iron for changing brands. No questions asked. But it's cash only. Like the sign says, superior work, no credit. Folks, I hope you enjoyed this build of the Hanging Rock Blacksmith Shop, and we'll tune in again for more builds, how-tos, and other projects in the future. Don't forget to subscribe. Let's keep moving forward, amigos. Adios for now.